Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I'm going to try to quick fire off a bunch of questions, mainly questions, I think they're actually all about Skeleton Crew, and the first one comes to us from Violator, who asked, "Hey Thor, would you discuss the possibility that some people are not watching this show because it's just not the type of Star Wars show they want to watch and pay for, not simply because they don't know what they're missing? Maybe they know what it is and don't want to watch this kind of show even if it is good." And that is a completely fair point. And I understand anybody who has seen any of the marketing material, the trailers, the commercials, and thought to themselves, you know what, this just doesn't look like something that I want to watch. This does not interest me. Or I'm not going to subscribe or resubscribe to Disney Plus. I'm not going to give them my money just for a show that maybe is good for what it is, but is not something I would necessarily normally watch. Even I have to admit, after the trailers and such, thought, well, maybe it won't be bad. I don't think it's going to be a bad show. It looked like it could be okay, but I didn't think it was going to be something for me. I didn't think it was going to be something I was really going to like and get into. I was under the impression this was really going to be a kids show, and though, yes, it is very kid-friendly, it is more of a family-friendly show, and it does have its darker aspects. It does have a lot of intrigue. It is not the most predictable thing ever, which is often the case when you have a very family-friendly or more kid-oriented show. And no, I'm not trying to convince you or anyone else who just doesn't have any interest in the show to watch it. I've said before, this is not something I would recommend to absolutely everybody. This is not the best show I have ever seen. It is extremely good for what it is. I think it is a good Star Wars show in general or overall. But I totally get people not being interested in it for one reason or another, or that some might watch it and go, you know what, it just isn't my thing. It's fine, I guess, but it just isn't my thing. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend it to absolutely everybody. I wouldn't say this is a must-watch show. I would recommend it to anybody who, yeah, is a Star Wars fan. I would say if you got Disney Plus, give it a chance, or if you know a way to watch it without having Disney Plus, and I don't condone any pirating or anything like that necessarily, but if you have a way to watch it without having to pay for it, yeah, give it a chance if you want to. Maybe you'll end up liking it even though you don't think you would like it. But certainly there are people out there who this just isn't their thing. This isn't what they want out of Star Wars. They don't care to watch it. They don't care to pay for Disney Plus, certainly, to watch it. And that's fine. I get it. I have no ill will towards anybody who is not watching the show for whatever reason they don't want to watch it. I'm simply saying that, personally, I'm surprised at how good it is for what it is. That, again, not a show for everybody, certainly not. But if you want to give a Star Wars show a chance that is more family-friendly, yet has some other interesting aspects to it, I would recommend Skeleton Crew. All right, and moving on now, we have a question here from Cadillac DeMille, who asked, "Hey Thorpe, Skeleton Crew has been good so far. Still, there's a part of me that's a little frustrated because there are moments in each episode where they're either telling instead of showing, or you can sense that they could have elaborated on something, but they get to the solution instantly. My conclusion is that Disney's 8-episode season of around 30 minutes an episode formula is somewhat suffocating this show, making it a good show when it could possibly, if it breathed a little more, be a great or amazing show. What do you think?" And I totally agree with you. If you've been watching my reviews, you'll know that the 4th episode for me wasn't the best episode. It wasn't terrible, and there was good character growth. There was more mystery of Ad Atten as we went to Ad Akron, and there was good stuff in it. But how short it was kept it from being a really great episode. And I think if you add 10 minutes into that episode, and maybe explore what is going on with the clans a little bit more and how this might affect the kids a little bit and what they might think of how this relates to their own planet, and a few other things could have been explored, you probably have a really good episode, I thought the 5th episode was an excellent episode, the best episode so far, because it did have the time to do everything it needed to do. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like things were happening simply for them to happen, as you kind of mentioned in your comment. It felt like a complete episode is the best way to put it. And so often, not in just this show, not just in Skeleton Crew, but in Disney plus Star Wars shows in general, everything feels so rushed. Ahsoka is a great example of how sometimes you just skip completely over things in order to keep the plot moving, to keep the action coming, as Dave Filoni himself has even said, that they try to keep the action coming because, I don't know, they think that's what Star Wars has to be, constant action, when I think a lot of the time a little less action and a little more depth is what the show actually needs, not just action and pretty lights and colors and explosions. But anyway, even though, yes, I do think Skeleton Crew has been a really good show, I do think thus far, and who knows how these last 3 episodes are going to go. They might be longer episodes, they might be really short. But after 5 episodes, I do think it could be a bit longer in places, and that is probably the biggest complaint I have about it. All right, and kind of going along with that last question, and I guess they're not all Skeleton Crew questions necessarily, but we have this one from Eric Bradshaw who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think Disney Star Wars is afraid of big moments? I think it is, and it is to its detriment. From not having the original cast together, not seeing Luke and Ahsoka first meeting, and Sabine and Ezra. Would love to hear your opinion." And that is a really excellent question that I have wondered about myself, because I don't think it's necessarily fear that keeps them from doing it. I mean, the only reason you would think they would be afraid of it is because they would be afraid of getting it wrong and how the fans would react. But at the same time, not giving fans those moments, I think tends to be worse than getting them wrong, meaning that, yeah, if they had put the original cast back together in the sequel trilogy, as I think we all agree they should have, and it had not been the greatest thing ever, they had somehow screwed it up, I think I would have complained about it, don't get me wrong, I know myself. But I think I would have been more okay with them trying something together with them and kind of getting it wrong than I am with them just never having them back together at all. So if it's fear, it doesn't really make sense. Plus, some of the things you mentioned here, like Sabine and Ezra, what are you afraid of happening? Why would you not give that conversation between those two where Ezra asks, "How did you find me?" And she has to tell him, "Well, I gave the map to Thrawn to the bad guys so that they could find him, and now he might get back to the other galaxy and do some horrible stuff. I literally risked the entire galaxy to come and find you." That adds so much more emotion to those two characters. It makes the story more intriguing, certainly. And instead, they just leave that out because it's like they didn't want that to get in the way of the plot. They didn't want those two being at odds at all going into the final battle, I guess, where they try to stop Thrawn and Ezra ends up going home and Sabine ends up staying behind. I mean, can you imagine if they do have that conversation and they go into the final battle and they get split up again, as they do, and Ezra and Sabine kind of end on not so happy or positive terms, and now they might never see each other again. Sabine has gone through all this trouble to find him, to bring him home, and she succeeds, and yet Ezra was mad at her, and now Ezra feels guilty that he was mad at her. It just, again, could add so much more to the story than them just never talking about what they obviously would have talked about. Okay, and now we move on to a question here from Ted Adam Green, who asked, "Hey Thor, with a large number that started watching Acolyte that stopped after 3 episodes, give or take, I'm curious if there have been any who started this that have stopped, or have most that started been pleased with it and stayed the course. Thanks." And basing it off the numbers that I have personally accumulated by doing polls, it seems like the number of people not watching has stayed pretty consistent around, well, about 2/3 of the people who vote in my polls. The polls that are asking what you thought of the episodes each and every week, that is. Now, I'm not saying that is hard and fast evidence that people are continuing to watch who started to watch, or evidence of really anything at all. I'm just saying of the people watching my channel, it does seem like most that didn't start watching it haven't started, and that those who did have continued, though I'm sure there is some fluctuation there as well. Though all that said, we have heard from Alan Bergman, who is higher up at Disney, shall we say, that the numbers are improving. They have seen improvement with the numbers. They don't obviously release the actual numbers. We don't know just how many people are watching or anything like that. But he has said that there has been improvement and that they've been happy with the critical response to the show as well. So perhaps things behind the scenes are going better. Perhaps more and more people are watching each and every week, even though the show so far has not cracked into any of the top 10s, the streaming service top 10 list that we have. Though we haven't got the Nielsen ratings yet, which are usually thought of as the most accurate of the streaming service rating services. So who knows what they'll say when we eventually do get them. All right, and moving on now to a comment from Vamatsis. I hope I'm saying that one right. But they said, "Hey Thor, as much as I am loving the show, I can't help but feel there will still be some nod to the sequels somewhere towards the end. My fear is that the introduction of the last mint is the excuse of where future Palpatine was receiving all his funds. Like some mysterious ship comes at the end to pick up all the credits. The people on the planet think it's the Old Republic, but it's really a Sith ship going to the unknown regions towards Exegol." And though I wouldn't say there is a 0% chance of that, there's actually a pretty decent chance that could be a thing, because if you are trying to explain the sequel trilogy, then having a planet that is just minting untold amounts of money would be a way to do it. I'm not saying it is a great way to do it, but it would, yeah, it would explain where they got the funds to build all these ships on Exegol, I suppose. That said, I really don't think, or maybe it's I really don't want there to be any connection to the sequel trilogy. I just want this to be its own story, its own thing. I think that would be great. Not saying I don't like interconnectivity from time to time, or that we can't maybe someday try to explain the sequels if we're going to keep them in the canon, which I think will be the case. Though we have a question coming up, I think, about that. Anyway, I really don't think that is going to be the case. I don't think the show is going to be linked to the sequel trilogy at all. That's just my gut feeling. I think we would have seen maybe some kind of hints and clues about that already, instead of just at the very end, like, oh, a ship shows up to take the credits to Exegol because, of course, that's how they were funding the fleet out there. I think that would feel so out of left field at the very end that I just don't want that to be the case. I don't want the show to have anything to do with the sequels, just be its own thing. And it's good for what it is so far. So again, please just don't do something like that. All right, and now we get to that sequel trilogy question that comes to us from Terry Thompson, who asked, "Hey Thorpe, I won't go so far as to say Disney won't retcon the sequels. Most people who say that are sequel shills who don't understand the philosophy of business. It's always a 50-50 split depending upon who's in charge. Say a new president comes in that is a George Lucas and Expanded Universe Star Wars fan. That person could flip the entire narrative of the Lucasfilm business model on the philosophy of bringing in revenue based on Lucasfilm Limited's business history from 77 to 2012. And just like that, the sequels are retconned, and new sequels and shows along with the Mandoverse are brought into the EU canon. It's suggesting that one narrative can bring in substantially more revenue than the other, just business but beneficial to the wider bottom line, which is number one, Disney, but also the broader fandom." And kind of going along with that, there was this one from Devil Mias who said, "Hey Thor, Paramount has essentially retconned B Discovery through Lower Decks, so never say never." And I won't say never with the idea of retconning the sequels. I've said before that I don't think they want to do it because I think they would fear it's just going to cause an even bigger split in the fan base than they already have. Though that said, and I joked about this when it came to the Rey movie, which is kind of banking heavily on the sequels being potentially profitable long term, that they could build something from them or off of them and then kind of retroactively make them better and more appreciated. But I joked that if the Rey movie is an absolute flop, then that might actually cause Disney and Lucasfilm to look at the sequels and say, you know what? We don't think we can salvage these, so maybe we should retcon them. And as I've also said before, I think it's all about money. It is all about money with Disney. If you could convince them that retconning the sequels would make them a hell of a lot of money, that you could redo those films and not anger too many fans, and that you could bring back a majority of the fans who have left because of the sequels, and if they end up being really good, you could make a ton of money, and you could build from there and make a ton of money off of that. I think if they fully believed that was possible, they would do it. I mean, why wouldn't they? They don't actually, as I always say, they don't actually care about Star Wars. They don't care about the integrity of the story. They don't care about any of that. Disney, the ones who are actually at the very top, they're not Star Wars fans. Or, I mean, maybe some of them are to some degree. I can't say they're not fans at all. But you know what I'm saying. They don't really care about Star Wars the same way many of us who are hardcore fans care about it. Disney bought Lucasfilm to make money off of it. So if they thought that retconning the sequels would make them a ton of money, yeah, they probably would do that. Now, they don't seem to believe that's the case. And I think if they were going to do it, they would have done it already or would be planning to do it right now instead of these rumors and reports about Rey being the future of the franchise. For whatever reason, they really do believe that she is a character that can lead the franchise forward. And that can, as I said, kind of retroactively make the sequels better. I'm not saying I think that's the case. I'm saying they, for whatever reason, think that's the case. And thus, I don't think the sequels are going to get retconned unless they try it and Rey completely flops. And then maybe they go back to the drawing board and redo them. Who knows? All right, let's go back to Skeleton Crew now. And we have this one from Me. And I'm probably saying that wrong. My apologies. But they asked, "Hey Thor, do you think it's possible that Wim's mom is the Supervisor? It seems no one has seen the Supervisor in a long time, and we certainly have had the mystery of his mom dangled in front of us a couple times. If not, what do you feel is the possibility for being tied into Tech Renaud and the pirate storyline somehow. Also, I watched all 5 episodes of Skeleton Crew yesterday after your overwhelming positive reviews and really liked the show. I even recommended the show to a stranger this morning. Thanks for all you do. Love your content on both channels. And first of all, glad to hear you took my recommendation, and even more glad to hear you enjoyed the recommendation, that you enjoyed the show. Nothing worse than recommending something to somebody, and then you ask what they thought, and you get that, it was okay response. But anyway, I think there's a chance that she could be the supervisor, or that she knows a lot more than she is letting on. I'm sticking with the theory that the supervisor is some sort of droid that has been programmed to just make credits and has been doing that for who knows how long. Though I also do think there is a chance that the Tech Renaud is part of this as well. That he found these planets years ago and has, I don't know, just been alive all this time, depending on what species he is, because we did not get to see his face, conveniently enough. That he might still be alive somehow, or maybe he died a long time ago and was just piling up the credits. But I think there's a chance he is involved with it. I think there's a chance that Wim's mom knows more than she is letting on. And I do think that statue we saw in the 4th episode at Akron with the head kind of cut off will be a big clue at some point that we're going to see that statue maybe on another planet and it's going to link it all together. I don't know what it is, but I'm very curious. Again, I think this has been a fun show. It's been a good show, and the mystery has been one of the best parts about it. All right, and one final question here, or maybe just one final comment, and it comes to us from Nico Wo, and again, I'm probably saying that name wrong, but they said, "Hey Thor, I initially didn't care to watch the show due to its plot. However, when I clicked on your poll about the latest episode, I saw that the majority of those who gave it a try thought it was a very good. So I, 26, who grew up with the prequels, gave it a try and watched it with my dad, who is 64 and watched the original trilogy and sequels in the cinema. We both were really into it and thought that it was, apart from Andor, the first show that feels like actual Star Wars, but in a refreshing new manner. Both of us think that there is still so much potential for new stories to be told within this beautiful world building that Star Wars always had. We hope the series will be a success as well as Andor Season 2. And yeah, I'm right there with you. I know I say it all the time, but I am always rooting for Star Wars, and it is nice to see what is, in many respects, a win for Star Wars, the show. It has been well received by those watching it, though, of course, the lost part is that not so many seem to be watching it. But those who are watching it are really enjoying it, and we have Andor Season 2 in a few months, which, fingers crossed that it can live up to the hype. I think that myself and others are kind of building around it right now because Andor Season 1 was so good. But yeah, here's to hoping Skeleton Crew can stick the landing, that Andor Season 2 is good, and that what they come out with next, that if they retcon the sequels, if they don't retcon the sequels someday, that whatever Star Wars we get in the future is also good, because, as I say, I'm not going to stop being a fan of the franchise. I may someday, if Disney screwed it up enough, stop watching it, I suppose. But I'm always going to be a fan of Star Wars. I'm always going to root for it. So here's to hoping for a bright future for the franchise. Alright, well that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think about anything I had to say here, or respond to any of these questions yourself if you want to. Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you gotta do, you start your comment off with, "Hey Thor," it catches my attention, I potentially read it in a future video and respond to it. But whatever the case may be, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.